Isak, it's wonderful to see you. Um, you serve as the Group Executive Director of JAM International. You are a direct partner for Feed My Starving Children, and you receive the Manapak meals. Let's talk a little bit about the hunger pandemic and what does that mean in the countries you're working in?
The consistent theme that is flowing through that is just an incredible increase in food insecurity. Many of these countries we work in, most of them have quite high levels of food insecurity, child mortality, pre-COVID. And yet now, as a result of this pandemic and the impact of it, we're just seeing such an increase in the volume. So I'll give you an idea. Just here in South Africa, where I am right now, we have seen our beneficiary requirement or beneficiary load in our programs go from just over 120,000 to over 500,000 beneficiaries that we're needing to reach on a daily basis. And that is literally climbing every day. We're seeing food insecurity in South Africa like we've never seen before. And that is no different to any of the other countries. Some have seen a slightly later impact of COVID-19. So they haven't been as impacted as South Africa until now, or other parts of the developed world like the US and so on. But what we know that means is that the impact is still coming. Their caseload is starting to rise. The loss of jobs and of any economic activity is getting worse and worse in those countries, and so we're seeing that lag of food security. And this is a message we keep bringing to people around the world. Food insecurity will take more lives on the continent of Africa, and I say this with absolute both confidence and a terror inside of my heart, that food insecurity, without doubt, will cost more lives in the continent of Africa than the pandemic or this virus itself. While there isn't a cure right now for COVID-19, there's no vaccine, there's no cure for this virus. There will be one day, but there isn't one right now. But the truth is that the greatest killer of children's lives, or one of the greatest, there is a cure for. It's just food. That's all it is. It's being able to extend that bowl of food to that child. Reaching that child in time is the critical ingredient. And so when there isn't food, or we don't get the food there in time, the short answer is children die. Lives are lost. Mothers' hearts are broken. I often say hope is not a nice to have, it's a game changer.
Yes.
And that's what that food is right now. That food is not a nice to have. That food is hope. It's a game changer for these families.
You put food in a mom's hands for her children, and not just for today, but for a week or for a month. And she's never maybe experienced that much food ever, but you see this transformation right before you, because now she can think beyond just today.
I think people often get confused or challenged by this process, because they say, well, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And we agree with that, absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't have our tagline, helping Africa help itself.
Yeah.
But the reality is if that individual dies before they learn how to fish, then what have we achieved? Okay. And so when you're dealing with people at the level of vulnerability that we many times are, you have to start with meeting that immediate need, saving their life, and then taking them to that point of resilience where they're able to actually themselves sustain or withstand shocks that will hit them, whatever that shock might be. So it might be a flood, it might be a drought, it might be a pandemic like we're facing now, that they're able to actually weather some of the storms that come at them. And then the next step is to take them to stability. And that's where true self-sustainability, community sustainability, building economies comes from. And so we believe that those who can and should be working should be working. Yes. But, children shouldn't be working. Children should be, we're in the developed world, we're totally against child labor. well, why do we then see it as a solution, or that in places like Africa? You know, the reality is that children should not be working. Children should be getting an education. And people often will say, well, education changes everything. That's the game changer. I agree. But the problem is, if you don't start with food and meet the nutritional needs of these children, the education has no impact, because their little brains have not been able to develop in the way that they needed to actually benefit from that education. They can't pay attention and concentrate in school because they have no energy. They're lethargic because they're malnourished. Okay. And so the reality is that food is as much of a game changer as what the education is. And if we deliver education, though, without food, many times we're going to fail in our program. But if we deliver food and education together, and that's why we love school feeding so much, and that's why we love Feed My Starving Children so much, because you guys get it, and your food is so perfect for school feeding programs. And so when you implement those two together, you're helping those that shouldn't be working to get an education, to get the nutrition they need, that will change their future and ensure that we're not having to help their children in future. But equally, you're also helping their family by doing that. And then we believe in providing jobs to those who should be working.
Say, as we look at the nutrition and we look at just the fact that we've got this food, what happens if there isn't food coming to you? What happens if there isn't that nutritious food that we send you?
The quick answer to that is people die. You know, children's lives are lost. Now, we have more than 200,000 children that die on the continent of Africa every single month as a result of malnutrition. That was pre-COVID. Okay. So you can only imagine how those numbers are ramping up right now. They actually can't even keep track of it fully. I mean, even the United Nations is struggling to really keep track of exactly how that poverty data is increasing. You know, to me, it's not about tracking data. It's about the individual life. I know what it's like to look a mother in her eyes, sitting in a malnutrition clinic, holding her child that just died. I know the brokenness that you see there. I know the helplessness and the sense of absolute regret at the fact that we had not been able to reach her child earlier. And, you know, a mother in Africa or anywhere else in the world, no mother feels any different about losing a child. Right. It doesn't matter what poverty you find yourself in. It doesn't matter what geography you find yourself or from what culture you're from. The loss of a child is a tragedy to any mother or any father. And it's a tragedy to our society. And so, you know, for me, the driving force is the fact that we do know what happens when there isn't food, but we also know that we're able to get food to those children if people will just make it possible for us to do so. And getting them food means saving their lives.
Isak, I just can't thank you enough. God bless you for the work that you and your team does.
Really want, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of each and every one of the families that are being impacted by our partnership, to every single one of you as volunteers, to each donor and partner of Feed My Starving Children, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for being there during this pandemic, because by you being there for FMSC, you're making it possible for us to express God's heart and to extend his hands to so many in need and to save so many thousands of lives.